you all for being here. We want to have a conversation about restorative justice, and I know you all work in this area. So I thought we might start just by asking you how you came to this work. Rasheeda?
Well, I was a school teacher for Metro Nashville Public Schools, and without really knowing what restorative justice was, we did a lot of restorative practices in the classroom. I started out as a Freedom School intern through Children's Defense Fund, and that's everything we did. We didn't discipline the children in any negative way. I mean, we're high school students, so what were we really gonna do? So we had to find creative ways to engage with the students, engage with the parents, to fix things when things went wrong in relationships, when the kids misbehaved or whatever. And so I think it was just a natural progression. I took that into the classroom, and that was really my first experience with restorative justice.
And what are you doing now?
Now, I run an organization called GIDEON'S Army, Grassroots Army for Children, and we are working on a citywide adoption of restorative justice, of changing Nashville, Tennessee, all of our systems to function on the philosophy of restorative justice. But also in Metro Public Schools, I do a lot of restorative justice, creating their models like within the school.
So JOANIE, can you tell us how you came to this work?
Yes, so I, like a lot of other people, was spurred to action by the non-indictment of Darren Wilson in his killing of Mike Brown. So that was just a few years ago, and I had been taking courses over the years in prisons. We had required readings like The New Jim Crow and things like that. And another really important book to me was Are Prisons Obsolete? When I read that, I was like, oh, the only way of thinking is abolitionist thinking. Like, we are living in an era basically where slavery is still existing. So before that, I had been thinking of reform, like that was my mindset, but now I realize like that's never gonna be enough. And just going along with abolitionist thought, you have to think of what's the alternative gonna be? Like, what are we gonna put in place to keep these new systems of oppression from rising again? And that's how restorative justice kind of stood out to me.
Great, thanks. And so where are you practicing?
I work with GIDEON'S Army, with these great humans around this table, and I'm a member of the planning team and different things like that. All of our meetings involve just restorative justice strategies, like doing circles, setting agreements, passing around the talking piece, like waiting your turn to share, listening like actively with respect, with love. So, yeah.
Maybe we should have used a talking piece for this conversation.
Maybe,
I didn't even think of that. How about you, Molly? How did you come to the work?
So I am a student here at, well, not here. I'm a student at the Divinity School at Vanderbilt. And I've been doing prison work for a couple of years. And last year I had a chaplaincy internship at the Tennessee Prison for Women. And I ran a group there where we did sort of group processing, talk therapy, and what I realized in hindsight is that I was using a lot of restorative practices in an informal way and just didn't have the vocabulary to sort of name them as such. So like JOANIE was talking about, we sat in a circle and we passed a talking piece, and we explored a lot of notions of harm and healing, which are sort of key concepts in a restorative justice framework. So at the end of last year, I was lucky enough to go to do a training at the Summer Peace Building Institute around restorative practices and sort of foundations of restorative justice, and learned kind of in a more formal sense how to talk about restorative justice and what the tools look like. And so, yeah, that's how I think I came to it in a sort of through the back door. Had been kind of using some practices and not realizing that I was using them, and then got to learn more about the work and sort of started to understand it as this, way of being in the world. So now I continue to do prison work and work with Gideon's Army, and just really try to sort of infuse it into everything that I do and every day when I walk around in the world.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
ERIKA?
Very similar to Rasheeda and Molly. My introduction to restorative justice was sort of a natural sort of output of my work and engagement here in the city. So in 2006 or 7, I do believe, Nashville was identified as a youth violence hotspot. So the Department of Justice, Federal Department of Justice, identified Nashville as a target city to help reduce the number of youth deaths and youth violence across the city. At the time, I was employed with an organization called the Oasis Center, which provides lots of variety of services for young people in the city. It is one of our sort of power players when it comes to youth interventions here. And I was put in charge of what we consider the community, the youth voice portion of this sort of federal grant. Practitioners such as Rasheeda, other individuals in the city, we were able to bring in to really start to think about how we reframe this issue and challenge with our students, with students at the table. They were the ones who were driving the decision making. They were the ones who were coming up with alternatives for themselves. And so, similar to what's been shared earlier, a lot of the tools that we were using eventually started to, the language around restorative justice was one that became more common. But we saw, as Molly shared, it really was more so an extension of how we chose to exist with one another. And I think from my perspective, what's really important is that young people themselves saw this as a tool and an alternative for what was currently occurring within the city of Nashville. From there, went on to volunteer with Gideon's Army. We piloted a program in a middle school here, which was probably the first time I used the term actual restorative justice in a setting with young people who were engaged in maybe some risky behavior and potentially had the potential to be pushed out of school because of different policies and procedures within the school system.
Thank you.